Hey guys, welcome to CraterMania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater, and I'd like to formally welcome all of you to Universal Monsters Week here on my 500 Movies of 2025 series. I'm all ready to go. I got my Lon Chaney um, and Lon Chaney Jr. shirt on for this tonight. For this episode, this will be movies number 89 through 94 of the 500 movies in 2025. Um, so, the Universal Monsters, uh, this whole franchise is one of my absolute favorite things in the world. So, this week is going to be extra special for me personally on the channel. And I'm going to do a huge deep dive into some of the more important movies to me in the franchise. So I'm not going to be covering all of these. I'm going to be doing 6 of these tonight, and then for part 2 on Sunday, I'll be doing another 6. I know there's a lot more than 12 movies altogether in the Universal Monsters series, but like I said, right now, I'm just kind of keeping it minimal and just doing my absolute favorite ones that are in the franchise. Um, and this one could be kind of a long one. So you guys better go grab you some snacks and a drink or whatever you guys need to get, because I'm ready to do the Monster Mash. So let's go ahead and do this. So right off the bat, we have to start with what is one of the pioneers to not only just this franchise, but to the horror genre overall, and that's the 1925 classic silent film, The Phantom of the Opera, with none other than Lon Chaney himself. Um, so, The Phantom of the Opera from 1925 is, like I said, a landmark of silent horror and just the genre in general in many ways. Um, it's a testament, I think, to the fascination that people have with tragic stories. Sometimes this one is kind of overshadowed by later adaptations, but this one's definitely my favorite, and this version just really holds a unique place in cinematic history, both for its terrifying performances and its groundbreaking makeup effects as well. Um, so the film's production was notoriously a mess. While Rupert Julian is credited as the director, the actual directing credit is heavily debated with this one. So Rupert Julian was hired to lead the project, but his vision reportedly was clashing with what Lon Chaney wanted to do with the movie. Um, and rumors have persisted that other directors, including Edward Sedgwick and I forget his name. It's uh, Carl Laemmle, the head of Universal Studios. It was his son. I forget his name, but he was also rumored to have a part or contributing to the direction of the movie. Um, so the origins of the story, they originate with Gaston Leroux's novel from 1910, which was Le Fantôme de l'Opéra. Um, Universal Studios, they snatched up the rights of this quick, and because they were, hoping to capitalize on the horror genre that they pretty much, pioneered with Hunchback of Notre Dame, which came out a couple years earlier, which also stars Lon Chaney. And so the story of this movie is that it unfolds within this opera house. It's in Paris, and there's these rumors like of this phantom lurking beneath the stage and like the labyrinth of these tunnels that are just haunting the opera house. Um, Meanwhile, there is this young and talented singer named Christine Day, um, who finds herself, I guess, tutored in a way by this mysterious voice that she believes is the angel of music um, that was promised to her by her dead father. This angel, of course, is the Phantom, and whose real name is Eric, and and he is captivated by Christine's voice and believes that he can mold her into a star. Um, so Christine, she starts to become really unnerved uh, at at a certain point in the film by Eric's obsessive control and his just demands for attention. But she also at the same time attracts the attention of this guy named Raoul, who is a was a childhood friend of hers, and now he's like just this handsome and wealthy guy that attends the opera, and the romance between those two infuriates the Phantom, which causes him to be jealous, and it drives him to commit all these violent acts. Um, so the Phantom he orchestrates this chaos during a performance of Faust, and he causes this huge chandelier to crash into the audience, and after this, he abducts Christine, and he brings her down to this underground lair that he has, and um, this is which is beneath the opera house, and it's there that she unmasks him, and then his hideous, deformed face is revealed. So he forces her to choose either marry him or and live in darkness forever, or condemn Raoul to death. Um, so Christine, she's horrified by all this, but ultimately she's still very compassionate, and so she fakes this agreement with the Phantom to save Raoul, so she's basically lying to him. However, she's not fooling the Phantom. Uh, so Raoul, with the help of this mysterious figure named Ledouche, I guess that's how I've always said his name because it's spelled Ledous. So I've always called him Ledouche. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce it, but that's what I'm going to call him. But he just, he happens to know Eric's true past. So they make their way together through this labyrinth underground to rescue Christine. And uh, they're captured eventually, but ultimately they do escape thanks to Christine's pity for the Phantom. So the movie concludes with the Phantom, defeated and emotionally broken, pretty much, and he's being hunted by this angry mob. Uh, to where he finally meets a dead end and stops. He turns to the crowd and he holds up his fist like this, like he's holding a weapon or something, and then he reveals that there's nothing in his hand. So he gets the final laugh in a way, I guess, and by tricking the angry mob. Um, but then he's quickly beaten to death and thrown into the river. So in some versions of the story, he dies at Christine's touch, finally finding peace. And in other versions, he escapes into the sewers, uh, kind of leaving his fate to the audience unknown. Um, so so yeah, I mean, I love this movie. Like I said, it's one of the pioneers of horror, and as far as not just like the story being told, but the effects here, it's fantastic. S- Also, we got Dead Pit Radio in the house here tonight. Says you could be a play-by-play announcer for Wildfire Championship Wrestling, boys. I could. I would definitely do that if they offered that to me. I probably would take it. Um, but yeah, so I guess let's go ahead and talk about some of these characters in this movie. So Eric, aka the Phantom, is played by Lon Chaney Sr. here. Um, he is the heart and soul of this story, and because he represents just this artistic genius that is twisted by society, that's rejected him, and he's living with this unbearable loneliness. So, Lon Chaney's portrayal is legendary, I believe, and the way he self-applied makeup and creates this truly terrifying and just unforgettable image. To me, he is the godfather of monster makeup that inspired so many that followed in his footsteps, like Jack Pierce and Tom Savini and Stan Winston, Rob Bottin, and just a bunch of guys, and even Tom Savini was so inspired by Lon Chaney that he named his son Lon. So that's really cool to me. And that is also the reason, as partially the reason why Lon Chaney was used so frequently in Hollywood films, because he pioneered that whole thing of like being able to do his own makeup and effects and everything on himself. I mean, that's so awesome, even to this day, to think how impressive that is. Um, and the importance of the Phantom character truly lies in his complex duality, because he's a monster that's capable of all this horrific stuff, but he's also this really deeply wounded artist that's just yearning for love and acceptance. Um, and speaking of his love, the character of Christine Day in this, who's played by Mary Philbin, uh, she's the object of the Phantom's obsession and Raoul's affection. She embodies the whole idea of innocence and talent, and she's torn between her fear of the Phantom and her pity for his suffering. Um, and I think she's important as well because she's the catalyst for the Phantom's eventual unraveling, and just the emotional core of the story. But ironically, her compassion in the end is the key to potentially freeing both herself and the Phantom. Um, so next we got like the other person that has affection for Christine, which is Raoul. He's played by Norman Carey. Like I said, he's this handsome and wealthy, heroic love interest of Christine, and he represents like the normalcy that's in society, and just his unwavering devotion to Christine. He um, he provides a light contrast to the Phantom's darkness in this, and he offers Christine a path to a normal life, and his his persistence at towards the end of and rescuing Christine really defines that the power of love. Um, and then we got the next guy that, like I said, if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, I apologize, but this is how what I've always called him, Ledouche. He's played by Arthur Edmund Carew, and he's just this mysterious figure who helps Raoul navigate the Phantom's lair. And I think he's like a former like police officer or something and because he knows all the Phantom's secrets and just his mysterious past, all where he came from. Um, so he provides like an insider perspective into the Phantom and his background. Um, so for some of the most memorable moments for me for this movie, uh, I got to start off by talking about the unmasking, which is the iconic scene of the Phantom getting his mask ripped off to reveal his face, and how his grotesque face. Um, I think that this moment is arguably the most famous and impactful scene in the entire film, because it really cements Chaney's place in horror history. Um, in more than one way, and just and cements that forever. I mean, by associating the Phantom with this terrifying disfigurement. Um, Another one that really stands out to me is the chandelier crash on the audience. So it's a really spectacular and chaotic set piece that really demonstrates the Phantom's terrifying power, I guess. Um, it's also a visual representation that of his rage and his ability to disrupt this the order of this establishment. Um, So not this is not really a scene, or it's kind of a collection of scenes. But when they go down into the underground layer of the Phantom, it's it's very elaborate down there, and it's got really that gothic feel, and it's almost like a character in itself because the dark tunnels and the little lake or moat or whatever it is that's down there, all that water, and just these bizarre like decorations and everything. It really kind of creates this unsettling atmosphere to where it almost feels like claustrophobic too. And it's a good reflection of the Phantom's of his mind. So I always love those scenes in the movie. Um, but one of my favorite scenes that I didn't talk about earlier when discussing the story is the masquerade ball scene. So in this scene, the Phantom he does attend the masquerade ball, and he's dressed in this Red Death costume, and of course the movie's in black and white. But according to the text monologue, where it's a silent film, it does describe him as the Red Death. And there are colorized versions of this movie as well, and I have seen. I don't typically like the colorized stuff when it comes to the Universal monsters, um, but they did do that scene with where he comes out in the Red Death costume and in the colorized version, and it looks really good. I think that's one of the scenes in the movie that does look really good colorized. Um, but it just that scene itself, it just highlights the fear that the Phantom can instill on just this massive level. And yeah, I love that. And I actually have something here because I'm going to be showing off some collection pieces too from my Universal Monsters collection. And I have something from that scene that I want to show you guys here in a little bit. Um, but as far as like the legacy and overall of the Phantom of the Opera, it's had a really profound and lasting impact on the horror genre. Um, it definitely solidified Universal Studios as a major player in the horror genre, and it paved the way for other classics like Dracula and Frankenstein, which I'll be talking about here shortly. Um, and it also demonstrated the power of just creating these sympathetic monsters. The Phantom, despite all the horrific stuff he's done, his character still makes the audience pity him and just have understanding, which is a characteristic that would become a staple of classic horror. And I can't talk about all this and not talk about the film's sets that are so impressive, and just the visual effects. They really set a standard for horror production design, and is super innovative, and inspired several films to come. Um, and also, I mean, the Phantom is a horror icon. I mean, I can't say that enough. He became one of the most recognizable characters in both horror literature and film, and it's inspired countless adaptations and parodies, like Phantom of the Paradise with Paul Williams, which, by the way, um, I just got in today in the mail. Funnily enough, that my new issue of Horror Hound magazine, which features Phantom of the Paradise. So that's really cool that I got that into the day that I was doing this stream. And also, if you haven't checked out my Horror Hound Weekend stream that I did last night talking about the upcoming convention. Go check that out on the channel as well. Um, but while other versions of Phantom of the Opera may have like, either refined the story or added, musical elements, I think the 1925 Phantom of the Opera remains to be this really unforgettable masterpiece of the silent film era. And it's a true testament to the power of a tragic tale and the brilliance of Lon Chaney's performance. Um, it's a film that really continues to resonate with audiences. That reminds us that beauty and brilliance can be found even in the darkest of places. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I love Phantom of the Opera. I think it is highly important to the history of horror. I'd love to hear you guys what your thoughts are about it in the comments. But right now, I'm going to show off a couple different collection pieces I have. I didn't get a ton of stuff out because I have a ton of Universal Monsters stuff. So I was very selective on the stuff that I'm going to be showing off. Um, so first off, I guess I will show you. So Sideshow Collectibles or Sideshow Toys, they put out years ago these 12-inch collectible figures of all these Universal monsters and other different characters from movies and stuff. And and if you can hear my dogs in the background, I apologize. They're barking maniacs. They're barking CraterManiacs, if you will. They do this shit every night. But if they just hear somebody outside or going down the road or something, so again, I apologize for that. But anyway, um, I have a couple different ones of these of the Phantom, so I was going to show them. And here's the box. Um, so that's and this is going to be the regular looking Phantom, the classic Phantom. And so there's the back of the box. Of course, you have the amazing Lon Chaney there. Um, so we open this up, and you can check him out there. So yeah, these, like I said, that is 12 inches tall. He comes with all kinds of really cool accessories. He's got his hat, his mask, a stand, and just a bunch, some really cool stuff. And I like how on the flap here it always has like the credits and just different things from the movie. And yeah, these are absolutely some of my favorite pieces in my Universal Monsters collection. Is these sideshow, and I would love to get more of these. Like I have several here that I'm going to show you guys tonight, and then I'll show some more on Sunday in the part 2 video. But I definitely don't have all of the collection, but I would love to eventually get them. Um, so the next one I want to show you is the scene that I alluded to about the masquerade ball where he's just as the Red Death. So this is the front of the box, and right here you can see he's standing there in his Red Death costume, and then here's a photo of it on the back of what it looks like in the movie. So let me open up the flap here, and so here is what the costume looks like. He's got the red, that's the Red Death, and that's a really cool like skull mask, and he's got the really cool staff, and his hat's in there in the back. You can kind of see that. And yeah, so I absolutely love this. I've had this one for several years now. Both it and the other Phantom. But yeah, so those are the only two pieces that I pulled out of my stuff to show you guys. Like I got other Phantom stuff that I can possibly show off at some point on the channel if I do like a collection video or something. But I was trying, like I said, I was trying to be very selective on the pieces that I wanted to show everybody. Um, but let me go ahead, I guess, and move on to the next movie on this list, which is the 1931 Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi, and this is this movie is not just, I think, a cornerstone of horror and a cornerstone of the Universal Monsters franchise. But it's a cornerstone of cinematic history, really, because it establishes many of the typical tropes we associate with vampires in about every piece of uh, vampire lore that there is. Um, and while it's not the first adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel, it's arguably the most influential because it shaped the pop culture image of Dracula for generations to come after this. And it was directed by Todd Browning, and the whole story, not the whole story, but the movie itself was born out of Universal wanting to capitalize on the success of The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Phantom of the Opera. So Todd Browning, initially he was a circus performer, and he had this gift of just creating these amazing visuals and these unsettling stories. Now, however, the production did have several challenges. Um, the initial choices for Dracula included Lon Chaney, who sadly passed away before filming could begin on this. Um, but to think how wild that would be if Lon Chaney hadn't passed away and he was chose for Dracula. Um, that kind of raises the question if Bela Lugosi would have ever become the legend that he is. Um, but like I said, Lon Chaney was chose for originally chose for that, but he had passed away. Um, and Todd Browning's vision, it often clashed, I think, with what the studio wanted as well. Um, but ultimately, the stage adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel is what heavily influenced the script of this film. So the story, when it comes to this, is it opens with Renfield, who is played by the brilliant and amazing Dwight Fry. Um, he is so Renfield is traveling to Transylvania to finalize the purchase of Carfax Abbey in London for Count Dracula, who's played by Bela Lugosi. And Renfield, he when he gets there, he's immediately shaken by the local villagers, like their superstitions and their warnings about Dracula. And he just kind of like laughs it off, ignores it, or whatever. So he arrives at Dracula's castle, and despite some of the odd occurrences that's going on there, he still continues with his business. Um, so during the night, Dracula he's casting his like hypnotic influence over Renfield, which ends up turning Renfield into this raving lunatic and a loyal servant to Dracula. And he's like eating bugs and spiders and all these different insects and stuff. Um, so at this point, Dracula reveals that he's a vampire, and then he embarks on this journey to England on this big ship, and just leaving this trail of death, behind him, on his way there. And Renfield, who's locked in the hold of the ship, he ends up escaping, and he arrives in England. He's completely insane, and he's just ranting and raving about drinking blood. Um, so they end up taking him and putting him in this like mental institution. Um, so when they're in London, Dracula he poses as like this guy who's very charming and sophisticated, kind of like a noble person, I guess. Um, and then that's where he meets Mina Seward, who's played by Helen Chandler, and so he's just subtly, preying on her after he meets her, and she's the daughter of Dr. Seward, who's played by uh, oh my gosh, I forgot his name. Um, but it'll come back to me. But he's the head. Her father is the head of the local sanitarium where Renfield's being held. So Um, because of Dracula's hold on Mina, she starts to become increasingly pale and lethargic, and her friend Lucy um, ends up being a victim of Dracula and drains her blood, and she dies. Um, so after this, Doctor Seward, he's concerned about Mina's condition and the strange circumstances that surrounding Lucy's death. So he consults with Professor Abraham Van Helsing, who is played by Edward Van Sloan. And he's just like a doctor or a physician, whatever, and an expert on the occult. So Van Helsing, he quickly recognizes the signs of vampirism, and he starts this investigation. Eventually identifying Dracula as the culprit. So there's this whole back and forth, like a battle of wits and wheels between Van Helsing and Dracula. And as Van Helsing, he's attempting to protect Mina and destroy this vampire before he can claim her soul. Um, and the ending sees Van Helsing and John Harker, who I almost forgot to talk about. So John Harker is played by David Manners, and he is Mina's fiance. So they him and Van Helsing together, they end up cornering Dracula in Carfax Abbey, and drive a stake through his heart, and which ends his reign of terror for now. Um, but let's go ahead and talk about these characters. Of course, you got Count Dracula, one of the greatest villains in history of anything, and played by the legendary Bela Lugosi. Um, and Dracula is the quintessential vampire. Um, Lugosi's portrayal in this is absolutely iconic. He embodies the seductive charm and that kind of aristocratic um, type lifestyle, I guess, and this, it's just there's this underlying menace of the character that really solidifies the image of how people think of Dracula in pop culture. Um, and then when you talk about the villain of a story, you got to talk about the hero, and that's of course Professor Abraham Van Helsing. Um, Again, played by Edward Van Sloan. He's this really intelligent and determined vampire hunter. And Van Helsing's expertise in the occult really makes him this primary force that opposes Dracula. Um, he represents reason and just scientific understanding as well, while combating this supernatural evil. Um, and I definitely got to talk about Renfield, Dwight Fry, one of the best like actors in general when it comes to the Universal monster movies. Renfield in this is a very tragic character, however. Um, Renfield, he's kind of used as a symbol for Dracula's power and influence. And you see that as his whole descent into madness and serving Dracula, it really provides a glimpse, I guess, in Dracula's ability to corrupt and control. And speaking of all that, you can talk about the love interest of Dracula here, which is Mina Seward, played by Helen Chandler. She's just the innocent victim in all of this, where she is just, she's gradually succumbing to Dracula's influence. She really represents like the purity and just vulnerability that Dracula, seeks to corrupt. So yeah, I mean that's a it's she does an absolutely amazing job in this movie. Helen Chandler as Mina. So, and then of course again John Harker, and I apologize I didn't talk about him enough, but I need to talk about a little bit about his character because he is important to the story. John Harker is played by David Manners, and like I said, it's Mina's fiance, and he represents the traditional hero in all of this, right along with Van Helsing, because he's willing to fight for the woman that he loves. So he's more than happy to assist Van Helsing in this final confrontation with Dracula. Um, Now, as far as the most memorable moments for me in Dracula, um, definitely when Dracula first appears. So his entrance into the movie is just this slow reveal of Dracula in the castle staircase, and it's a really cool and memorable, suspenseful moment. And Lugosi just has this piercing gaze about him, the where it is kind of like this, also this dignified like posture about him that really um, just immediately establishes his presence. And speaking of that piercing gaze of his, it's very, like I said, it's very hypnotic of him. And the close-up shots of Lugosi's eyes, those shots are often set along with this like dramatic music that plays, and it just shows how effective the idea of Dracula's like hypnotic power and control over his victims. Um, and then, like I mentioned earlier about Renfield, how he's like he goes insane because he's under this control of Dracula, so he's like eating bugs and spiders and all these different insects. Just Dwight Frye's portrayal of that is both disturbing and very memorable for me. His the manic laughter that he like puts out in this is crazy. But I absolutely love it, and just his obsession with consuming all these insects. It just perfectly really depicts the character's madness that it's induced by Dracula. And then, of course, another memorable moment is the final confrontation, that ending scene in Carfax Abbey, which culminates in Dracula's destruction, or so we think. And it becomes this. It just at the time, it becomes this satisfying ending to the suspense and the terror that's just been built throughout the whole movie. So I kind of alluded to it a little bit already, but I mean, the legacy of Dracula, I mean, it just has this, a really lasting impact on the horror genre and pop culture in general. Because if you look at Lugosi's portrayal, it's really defined by the image of just the suave and sophisticated vampire, and it's just you're going to remember his portrayal for that forever once you see it. I mean, because it is just legendary, and it's influenced countless portrayals and like film and TV and literature. I mean, the cape, the slick back hair, the Transylvanian accent, all these things have become instantly recognizable for vampire characters throughout history. Um, and just Dracula was also the movie itself was um, a very big success for Universal Pictures, and it solidifies the studio's dominance in the horror genre throughout the 1930s, and just it launches like just a whole series of classic monster movies. Um, the film also popularized many of like elements of the vampire lore other than just the look itself, but just the whole you know vampires not liking sunlight or garlic, and need for a stake through the heart. All these concepts were pretty much introduced here, and it's really been just burned into people's brains at this point of that those rules because of the original Dracula. Um, and Dracula has also directly inspired, numerous remakes and sequels and other adaptations, as well as just influencing countless other horror films and TV shows about vampires. Um, and it's the visual style of the movie really continues to resonate in a lot of modern horror movies too. Um, so Dracula as a character, like I said, he's a cultural icon. Thanks in large to in part to this film, and he's just become a cultural icon as well. I mean, um, he's just a character who protrudes like both fear and fascination. He remains just a very popular subject for a lot of artists and writers and filmmakers. Just kind of ensuring that his legacy in the realm of horror and pop culture. Um, so now I'm going to get into the Dracula stuff of my collection. So let me go ahead and start with. Um, so this is just like the 12-inch sideshow um, the collectible figures like the phantoms that I showed you earlier. Uh, However, this is a little bit different because this was a series that they did called the Silver Screen editions, to where they're actually all in black and white. And even the boxes and everything are in black and white. So you got the classic picture there of Bela Lugosi as Dracula on the front, and then there's another one on the back there with big long description that I'm not going to read. Uh, but um, yeah, so once I open it up here, like I said, the figure itself is also in black and white. And it has the bat that he transforms into, and there's a couple rats there, and his little stand, and yeah, I mean it's super cool. I love these silver screen ones because they just kind of go back to the classic look of the films that are in black and white. Um, so yeah, that's the sideshow one. If you guys want to look for one of those for yourself, you can probably eBay would probably be your best bet. Um, so the next thing I want to show is this motionette. So these came out in the 90s. This one is I don't know if this one is supposed to be like based off the likeness of Bela Lugosi because it doesn't really look like him. But I mean, it's the Universal Monsters brand, and I think when everybody thinks of Dracula, um, with Universal Monsters, definitely Bela Lugosi is the first one you're going to think of. But I actually got this at a flea market about a couple years ago, I think, and I think I only paid like $10 for him. So yeah, so I was like, hell yeah, I'll add that to my Dracula collection and my Universal Monsters collection. Um, so the next thing is this little guy right here. So he doesn't really look like Bela Lugosi, if you can even see that. Um, but I mean, you see in the background on the card, it does have the Bela Lugosi Dracula image, and it's also on the back as well. Um, these came from the Dollar Tree. So I got this years ago from the Dollar Tree, and these were just $1 a piece at the Dollar Tree. So, and I have several other ones too. I have a Frankenstein monster down here too, like this. I'm gonna show here in a little bit, and I have some other ones as well. Um, so these next things I want to show are two little Dracula plushes. And this one, I'm not sure what the series is called. I think it was called like Mondo Heads or something. I can't remember. But this one, not sure what the series for this was called, but this was actually one from a claw machine. But yeah, these are just a couple really cool Dracula plushes that I have that I really like. And the last Dracula piece I want to show, this just came out not too long ago. These are from the Funko Pops, and this is the Blacklight series of the Universal Monsters. And I love this, but I tell you, when I look at this Dracula, I don't think of the Bela Lugosi Dracula. Um, to me, this one looks more like the Duncan Rager Dracula from the Monster Squad, one of my favorite movies. And but yeah, I mean, this is the only Dracula pop figure I have, though. Some of the older ones are a little bit more pricey, but I hope to get them somehow one day. Um, and but yeah, that's the last Dracula piece. that I was going to show. And like I said, I have tons more stuff that I can definitely show later down the line in another video or something. But I'm just trying to keep this very selective for tonight. Um, so moving on, the next movie on this list that I watched this week is one of my absolute favorites out of the Universal Monster series. And that's the original Frankenstein from 1931. So like I said, it was released in 1931, the same year as Dracula, and this movie is just a masterpiece. It's a and very very important part of horror movie history as well. So it's an iconic adaptation of Mary Shelley's novel that just shows a more of a visual representation of the monster for the viewer. Now it's not a perfect like faithful adaptation or anything, but the direction in this movie from James Whale, the performances, and just the overall like theme of the movie continues to really resonate with people this day. And I really have never met a single person in my life that did not love this movie or was influenced in some way by it. Um, so the movie itself was directed by, like I said, James Whale, and his direction is really crucial to understanding why the film became a success. Um, he brought a sensitivity to the monster, and I often find myself sympathizing with the monster. Um, and the origin of the film really lies where Universal Pictures they were just attempting to capitalize on the success of their earlier horror hit from earlier in the year, Dracula. So producer Carl Laemmle Jr. He sought to adapt another classic horror novel, so he chose Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to adapt. Um, and the movie was a huge success, and again it solidified Universal as a major player in the horror genre, just like it had done with the past few films that they'd done, and just launching a franchise of just not just Universal monster movies as a franchise, but just the Frankenstein movies as well. And we're still continuing to this day because I think they're getting ready to do a new Frankenstein movie. I think Christian Bale is in it. I think he's playing the monster, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm not sure when that comes out. But my whole thoughts on the newer adaptations of these that are coming out here recently of Universal monsters, like the Mummy with Tom Cruise. I've not seen that new Wolfman that just came out, but I'm not hearing very good things about it. Um, but I'm definitely going to see it at some point. And then, we got this new Frankenstein, so I don't know much about it yet, but, I guess we'll see. But anyway, the story of this movie revolves around this ambitious and very arrogant Dr. Henry Frankenstein. So Henry is just this brilliant young scientist, which is obsessed. He's obsessed with conquering death. Um, so he disregards all these warnings from his mentor, who Professor Waldman, and he's also his concerned fiance Elizabeth. So Henry he embarks on this project in this little remote, dilapidated castle. So he's aided by his hunchback assistant Fritz, who's played by Dwight Frye, and he robs graves and experiments with these like cadaver parts, and just believes that he can reanimate a dead body and bestow life upon this inanimate flesh. Um, so after gathering like all the necessary components that he needs to make his creation, which includes a large and this powerful brain, which was stolen from Baldwin's laboratory. Um, what happened with that is so Fritz he went to go get the brain. He meant to get like the normal brain, but he like dropped it and it contaminated it or whatever. So he had to get the other brain that was on the desk, which was abnormal brain. Um, so so Henry he assembles this this grotesque creation in his laboratory. And during one stormy night, fueled by just excitement, and he throws a switch, and he unleashes this powerful electric charge um, into the body, and we get that iconic scene from the original Frankenstein. It's alive! It's alive! And to me, like even thinking about that, talking about that scene, gives me chill bumps, and because it's so iconic, and when it comes to the history of horror. Um, but anyway, however, Henry soon discovers that the brain Fritz stole was not that of a normal criminal, like I said, but of this murderer. So the monster initially is innocent and childlike, but is he has his flaws though, to where he's prone to these violent outbursts. And Fritz is a real asshole to him as well. He just torments the monster, just causing that fear and rage to be built up in him. Um, so eventually, the monster does escape the castle, and he starts wreaking havoc on this on the countryside. So, and he unknowingly drowns this little girl named Maria. So, based what happened with that, because he's just plucking these flowers, and she's throwing them into like the lake or whatever, and they're floating. So he's kind of the monster's amused by this. So he just, not knowing any better, picks her up and throws her into the lake, and she drowns and dies. So it's really just a moment of this. Devastating clarity of the consequences of his natural form and strength. Um, so alarmed by this tragedy of what happened to the little girl, Henry and Waldman and the townsfolk, they form this hunting party to track down and destroy the monster. So Baldwin ends up getting tragically killed by the monster, and then the ending of this, sees the villagers cornering the monster in this old mill, where they end up setting it on fire. And the injury in the Henry in the process is injured, um, when in his pursuit of the monster, and he ends up, being thrown off the mill by the monster, but he survives. Um, but and we just see, as the movie ends, we see the this meal on fire and everything, and we're the audience is not sure of the fate of the monster. We assume that he has been killed. Um, so moving on to the characters in this, I need to talk about. So Dr. Henry Frankenstein, and this is played by Colin Clive. And like I said, he's this ambitious and ultimately irresponsible scientist. Um, he really represents like the dangers of this, of just unchecked ambition, and he's attempting to play God. So his obsession ends up blinding him to all these like ethical implications of his creation, and eventually he has this regret that kind of adds a layer of complexity to his character. Um, and then of course you have the monster played by Boris Karloff. So the monster is just this tragic character who is he's brought to life with a flawed brain, and despite his appearance, Karloff portrays him with this really surprising sense where you sympathize with the character, and it showcases his his initial innocence and confusion to everything. Um, so the monster's actions, even though they're violent, they're driven by fear and misunderstanding, and just the mistreatment that he receives, especially from Fritz. So, and um, Fritz met his untimely end from the monster because he literally became the definition of fuck around and find out. Like, no joke, because I mean he was a complete asshole to the monster, and he really was the reason that was causing him to be the way he was, being so violent. But like I said, the monster he represents the consequences of scientific pride and just humanity that can exist even in the most grotesque forms, I guess. Um, so, like I said, Professor Waldman, I still can't remember what the guy's name is. Um, but oh my gosh. Oh wait, no, I remember now. Professor Waldman was played by in Edward Van Sloan, who played um, Van Helsing in Dracula. So anyway, the guy, I hate when I do that. I hate having brain farts like that. But anyway, Dr. Frankenstein, this is his mentor. Professor Waldman is his mentor, and he's kind of like the voice of reason as well. So he ends up warning Henry of the dangers of his experiments, and he tries to provide this sense of like ethical grounding with Henry, but Henry doesn't listen to him, of course. And Dr. Waldman's eventual death kind of underscores the monster's whole destructive nature. Um, so Elizabeth, Henry's fiance, is played by Mae Clark, and she represents normalcy and in the world, I guess. And she's concerned about Henry's well-being, and she acts as this counterpoint to his whole obsessive ambition. Um, and then, of course, like Dwight Fry, who plays Fritz. He's Henry's hunchbacked assistant, who's very cruel and torments the monster and really contributes to that violent behavior. Said, he's the definition of fuck around and find out for sure. Um, and he represents that just potential for, I guess, the of what human evil is, and that an abuse of power. And I'm sure there's a political joke in there somewhere, but I'll not touch that with a 10-foot pole. Um, so to talk about some of my most memorable moments from the film, so I definitely got to talk about the creation scene where they're raising the table and there's all these flashing electrical arcs, and that scene with Henry saying it's alive. It's like I said, it's so iconic, and it just gives me chills every time I talk about it and think about it. It's just because it's so important to horror history. It's a really a cinematic masterpiece of just a build up and release. Um, so a really beautiful moment in this movie, I think, is when the monster's first glimpse of sunlight. So after he escapes from the castle, the monster reaches out to sunlight for the first time, and Karloff's interpretation in this is very innocent and childlike, and it really further adds to the tragic elements of the character. And I absolutely love that. I mean, this is such a brilliant movie. Um, and then, of course, while it was considered a very controversial scene at the time, and was often censored on TV. The whole scene with the little girl Maria being drowned. It's a scene that's devastating because of the innocence and just the tragic consequence that happens. Um, and the monster's attempt to play with the little girl kind of highlights his like childlike nature, but it also at the same time showcases the danger of his very unnatural strength. But I think that's definitely while it is controversial, it's definitely an important part to the plot of what eventually happens at the end of the movie. Um, and speaking of the end of the movie, let's go ahead and talk about that. So, um, the villagers, they're armed with torches and pitchforks and all this stuff, and they're chasing the monsters into this mill. And once they set it on fire, it's I mean, something about it is just really visually striking to me. It really creates this sense of primal fear and you know, just the mob mentality. It just that drives the destruction. Um, Hey Russell, what's going on? Glad to I haven't seen you in here in a while, man. Been hiding on me or something, haven't you? But glad to have you here for my Universal Monsters Week. When I was putting this together, I actually you were one of the guys I thought of because I knew that you would appreciate me talking about these movies. But yeah, glad to have you here, man. Um, but as far as like the legacy goes of Frankenstein from 1931. Um, I think it has undeniably shaped, you know, the horror genre, and you know, it continues to influence filmmakers and artists to this day. So its legacy is very undeniable. Um, so you look at Karloff and his portrayal of the monster in this with the flat head and the neck bolts and all that, it really has just become this definitive image of the Frankenstein monster, much like how Bela Lugosi's Dracula has become that definitive image of Dracula. Um, and you know this movie has influenced you know countless adaptations as well and parodies, especially one of my favorites, Young Frankenstein, which I will eventually cover on the channel because I that's a movie that I watch every year. I absolutely love it. um, and this film also you know established many, like I said, many of the tropes that's associated with monster movies, like you know the whole mad scientist, the tragic monster, the angry mob, and just you know just the overall themes of just scientific pride and the dangers of playing God. You know, we've seen that plenty of times in you know in movies. So I think this is really Frankenstein is really what pioneered all that. Um, Now, when I think about the atmosphere in this movie, James Wells has this like masterful use of shadows and lighting and sound. And I can't remember if it was Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein, but one of them ended up actually getting nominated for an Oscar because of the sound in the movie. So that's, and like I said, that's something that really stands out in this movie to me. Um, and you know the film itself just shows this importance of creating a very sense of dread and suspense. So yeah, I love everything about this movie. Like I said, it's an absolute masterpiece. Um, and it also, you know, it explores like the whole ethical implications of these experiments that are being um, done in the movie, and and that kind of thing also kind of continues to be relevant uh, um, in to this day in modern times because if you look at stuff like the advancements in cloning and genetic engineering and just and even AI now, artificial intelligence, I mean that's definitely kind of similar to what you know people were doing or what Henry was doing in Frankenstein because he was just basically messing with stuff that ultimately doesn't really help our world. Um, but Frankenstein, like I said, it's more than just a horror movie to me. It's really this cautionary tale that just that's about responsibilities that come with you know scientific progress and the potential for like tragedy when ambition you know outpaces ethics. Um, it's just it's a testament to the power of storytelling and the just this enduring appeal of the monster that's within us all, I guess. And you know, of course, you know, I gotta end this by saying Boris Karloff's uh, portrayal really cemented this film as a classic and just a major player in the horror genre. I mean, I cannot say that enough. Um, But let's see what you guys are saying before I show off some of the collection pieces. Um, so Russell, you said Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and Wolfman. Um, in 1948's film Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So if you tune in this Sunday, Russell, that is one of the movies that I will be covering because when it comes to all of the Universal Monster movies, Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein is my number one favorite. Um, I love Abbott Costello in general, all their stuff. They're to me those guys are comedy geniuses. Um, and also, yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Russell. But yeah, rest in peace to Gene Hackman, his wife, and his dog. I mean, that is, yeah, I read about that earlier today, and that's absolutely heartbreaking and just wow. I still can't believe because there's a lot of details coming out about that. My wife was telling me more about it. She read some stuff earlier, and it's just a very heartbreaking situation. So my heart goes out to their family, their friends, their fans. Gene Hackman, film legend, and it's just I hate to say this, but it's kind of ironic that I'm doing the Universal Monsters show starting tonight on the same day that this news came out about Gene Hackman because he played the blind hermit in the parody of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, which that I spoke of earlier, Young Frankenstein. So when Peter Boyle, who plays the monster in Young Frankenstein, he goes to that little cabin. Yeah, it's Gene Hackman that plays the blind hermit. So yeah, definitely rest in peace, Gene Hackman. My thoughts and prayers with his family, his friends, and everybody that cared about him. Absolute legend. Yeah. So but moving on, let's go back into a little bit of a lighter note. So let's talk about these collection pieces that I have from Frankenstein. So um, I guess let me see what I could do here. Let me just stack some of this stuff up here first on my desk, so I don't have to keep bending over to get it while I'm talking about them. Uh, I'll sit that there. And let's see. Is that no? There's a few more pieces here. Sorry, guys. I got a little bit, few more Frankenstein pieces that did anything else because Frankenstein's one of my favorite monsters. So yeah. But let me go just lay those there, and then first I'll go ahead and show off the this is the 12-inch sideshow collectibles Frankenstein. There's the front of the box, and here's the back, of course. Another iconic image of Boris Karloff there, and then inside, and there he is in all his glory, the Frankenstein monster. And something, I want to bring this up. So we call him Frankenstein's monster. We call him just the monster. And then there's some people out there that refer to him as Frankenstein. And a lot of fans will say, well, he's the monster and Frankenstein is the scientist, which technically they're correct. But if you think about it, like, so the monster is the creation of Henry Frankenstein. So it's almost like, if since it's his creation, it's like a part of him. So if you want to carry that lineage down to the monster, he is technically also a Frankenstein. And they allude more to that in Bride of Frankenstein. And once I get to Bride of Frankenstein to talk about that, I'll go more into depth on that for you. Um, but that was the Sideshow Collectibles monster. So this is like the Dracula I showed you guys earlier. This is the Frankenstein's monster that I also got from the Dollar Tree, and it has the Bride of Frankenstein in the background there, and then on the back is also that image as well. Um, But I just figured, since I'm showing off my Frankenstein's monster stuff, I go ahead and throw that in there as well to show you guys. Um, let's see here. So, oh yeah, I'll go ahead and show this off. So I'm a big Ninja Turtles fan as well, and in the '90s, uh, they were coming out with tons of Ninja Turtles action figures, and they would have different themed ones. And this was a series they did where they collaborated with the Universal Monsters. And this is the Michelangelo as the Frankenstein's monster. Um, and yeah, I bought this I think at a convention several years ago because I have them all loose out of the package. But this is one that was looked really good on card, and I didn't pay a whole lot for it. So I was like, I definitely got to get that and add that to my collection. And you can see on the back, there's the other ones as well. You have Raphael as the Mummy, you have Donatello as the Dracula, and Leonardo as the Wolfman. Um, like I said, I have all of those loose now the package, but I would like to get the rest of the set, on card like this because it looks really nice and displays really well. Um, let's see here. Let me go ahead and put that down there. And I guess I will grab these and show you. So these are a couple plushes that I have. This is like that big head one I showed you earlier of the Dracula, and this one is from a series from the '90s called Stuffins. So, and they made different sizes of these. These are just the small ones that they put out. Um, but they made much larger ones, which I have those as well. I just didn't pull those out to show those to you guys, but like I'll show them to you in another video. Like I said, I'm gonna keep my promise on that. I will show all of this stuff eventually. But like that is the small one of the set. So those are really cool. Um, let's see. Okay, so I have a couple Funko Pops. This was the first Frankenstein's monster. As you can see, his just name is Frankenstein on the box. This was the first Funko Pop that they put out of the Frankenstein's monster. Um, I and it's got like the rest of the series on the back. And the only other one that I have, which I'll show you guys here in a little bit, is the Mummy from this set. Um, because all these other ones are super expensive now, and I don't know. I was just an idiot for not grabbing them all up when I could back in the day. Um, but this is a later. Well, see if you look at this one, it has that logo right there on the front of the box, and I really like that logo that they use for these. But they ended up changing the logo in the past few years of the Universal Monsters, and I don't really care for this new logo. But this is one that it was a Walgreens exclusive, where he's holding the little flower that Maria had gave to him before he killed her. Uh, and see, there's the new logo. I don't really care for that logo. Um, it doesn't really scream horror to me. You know what I mean? Like the other one does, because that's it's a super cool logo. That text and everything they use. Um, but then these last couple things I wanted to show you from my Frankenstein stuff is first up. There's a VHS. So all these I'm going to be showing are VHSs. This one is actually still sealed, um, and it's super cool. It's got that classic image. It's got I'm assuming this is Elizabeth down here, and then you got Henry over here, and then of course Boris Karloff's monster image right there. Looking over them. And then the back has some really cool imagery on it. Like it looks like an old vintage poster image on the front there, or I'm on the back there. I'm sorry, and then just a little description of the movie. And yeah, that's super cool. I only paid $5 for that at a convention, and still sealed. So love that. Um, this is another VHS, just a different, cover. And it doesn't have Henry on it, but it has that, kind of close up, zoomed in image of Elizabeth. Um, so MCA Home Video put this one out. Who put this other one out? Uh, I think it just says Universal on it. But yeah, those are just the two different versions I have of the movie on VHS. Um, let's see. And then this is not of the movie. This is called Frankenstein, a cinematic scrapbook. I also picked this up at a convention for $5 as well, as you can see there. Well, can you see that? Maybe. Yeah. Well, it says $5. Um, but what this is just a collection of like movie trailers and just trivia about the movies, and it also kind of covers like spoofs like Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein and Young Frankenstein, and it's a really cool tape to watch if you just want to have something playing in the background or whatever on your VCR. If you still have a VCR, I love VHS still, so I use mine quite a bit. But that's it for the Frankenstein stuff. Let me go ahead and put this stuff down really quick. Sorry, I have a. You guys, if you could only see what my floor in my office looks like right now, it's an absolute mess. Um, so yeah, that was everything that I wanted to show as far as the Frankenstein stuff for today. But definitely we'll cover more of that stuff that I pull out and I'll show on the channel sometime later. Um, let's see what Russell's talking about in here. Uh, when I was a kid, we had universal model kits. You would glue. Yeah, um, I know of them. I've seen them like at conventions. Vendors have them and stuff for sale. I don't have any of those. Out of all of my Universal Monsters collection, I don't have any of those model kits. Um, but I would eventually like to get some of the and maybe put one together myself. I'm not very good at that kind of stuff. I don't think I've never I remember trying to put together when I was a kid, like the model cars and stuff, but I would always end up like getting halfway through and get bored, and I wouldn't finish it because I just didn't like having to put that shit together. But I think if it'd be more something I'm interested in, like Universal Monsters, maybe it would motivate me more to finish a model kit of that. So, but I have to get one of them first. Like I said, I don't have any, but I would definitely like to pick one up at some point. Um, so moving on now from one Boris Karloff classic to another, the next movie on this list is The Mummy from 1932. Um, and, while this movie is perhaps, I guess, less visually spectacular than its modern counterparts, it still remains deeply unsettling and very atmospheric. So it's a movie that really mines the fear of the unknown, and just the allure of forbidden knowledge, and just this enduring power of just ancient curses, and it solidifies this as this classic of the genre. Um, so this movie was directed by Carl Freund, who is a cinematographer who was known for his work on movies like Metropolis and Dracula. But the Mummy, it benefits greatly from his vision. So the origins of this movie too are somewhat kind of shrouded in mystery. I do remember reading that it drew inspiration from this then at the time a recent discovery of this like ancient Egyptian tomb in 1922. Um, so the story isn't a direct retelling of any specific Egyptian legend or anything. Instead, it just kind of creates its own mythology around this high priest that's been brought back to life, and it really just it offers like a blend of historical fascination and supernatural dread. Um, so as far as the story goes, the movie opens up in 1921 with these British guys who are on this archaeological expedition, which is led by Sir Joseph Wimple, who is excavating this tomb in Egypt. Um, they they uncovered this mummified remains of Imhotep, which is who was this high priest of ancient Egypt, along with this cursed chest that contains the scroll of Thoth, which is said to grant life. So so this young member of the expedition named Ralph Norton, he just ignores these warnings and everything, and he ends up reading aloud from this scroll. Um, and as he does this, Imhotep's mummy in the background, like in the sarcophagus, comes to life. So this terrifies Ralph, and he goes insane. And the whole expedition is just shaken, and they decide to seal this tomb. So 10 years later, Imhotep, who is now disguised as this modern Egyptian named Ardeth Bey, he resurfaces in Cairo and he seeks out this guy, Dr. Muller, who's an expert on like ancient Egyptian artifacts. And he's manipulating him into revealing the location of this lost princess, Ankh S. Inamon, I think is her name. But I'm just going to refer to her as the princess because her name is too hard to say. But yeah, he's trying to manipulate Dr. Muller into revealing the location of the lost princess in her tomb, because that's Imhotep's ancient lover. So using this knowledge and his hidden powers and stuff, Artist Bay, he begins to just orchestrate these events to bring the princess back to life. Um, and he believes he can resurrect her spirit within the body of this woman named Helen, who is just this beautiful young woman with this really just this uncanny resemblance to the princess. So he attempts to control Helen through this hypnotic suggestion, almost kind of like how Dracula does. Uh, you know, and because there's all these close-up shots of like Boris Karloff's face, where he's kind of like hypnotizing her in that moment, and he's drawing her closer to his plans and just exerting his will on her. Um, so Sir Joseph and his son Frank, they along with Dr. Muller as well, they become aware of Artist Bay's true nature and just his intentions. They they realize that he is not simply this collector that they thought he was, but he's this potentially dangerous force from the past. Um, and there's this whole tense battle of wills as they try to protect Helen from Imhotep's grasp and prevent him from fulfilling his ancient desires. Um, so the movie culminates in this confrontation where Helen awakens to this horror of Imhotep's plans, and she's empowered by a vision of her past as the princess. So she rejects him, and she's invoking like the power of Isis. So she's praying to Isis to banish him back to the realm of the dead. Um, and this, like I said, this movie is an absolute classic. It's one of the um, if you don't think of Frankenstein first when it comes to Boris Karloff, you're definitely going to think of the Mummy. And looking at some of the characters in this, like Imhotep or Ardeth Bey, it's the same guy. He just uses two different names. Played by the legendary Boris Karloff. He's the film's villain. And he just embodies this seductive danger of ancient power and undying obsession. Um, and Karloff's very restrained in this, but there's this he has this commanding performance as he always does, and it just really perfectly captures the character's um, wisdom, I guess you could say, and just there's just underlying desperation with his character. He just represents the past that's reaching out to claim the present. I'm gonna get a drink real quick because I'm kind of getting a bit parched. Feeling that mummy dust in my mouth, brother. Uh, but The next character I want to talk about is, of course, Helen, who's played by Zeta Johann, and she's the like I said, she's the object of Imhotep's desire, and she's this reincarnation of the princess, and she's important to the story because she represents that target of Imhotep's ritual, and she's the key to either his success or his failure. Um, and her ability to ultimately reject Imhotep and embrace her own will is really crucial to the film's ending. Um, let's see. Okay, okay. So the next character I want to talk about is Sir Joseph Wimple. Um, and he's played by Arthur Byron. He's the leader of the original expedition, and he represents like the voice of reason in all this, and just scientific curiosity. But also, there's the dangers of tampering with forces beyond understanding. And then you got his son Frank Wimple, who's played by David Manners, who was also in Dracula as John Harker. So he's making a reappearance here in the Universal Monsters series. Like I said, he plays Sir Joseph's son. He's Helen's fiance. He acts as more of the active force in trying to rescue Helen and combat Imhotep, which embodies this more modern and I guess practical approach to that supernatural threat. Um, and then there's Dr. Muller, who was played by Edward Van Sloan, which he was also Van Helsing in Dracula, and he was what was his character's name? And oh, he's Professor Waldman in Frankenstein. So, I and to my understanding, that would make him the first actor in the Universal Monster series to play three different characters in three consecutive Universal Monster films. So that's pretty cool. Um, but he was this expert in ancient Egyptian artifacts who becomes both fascinated and horrified by Imhotep's knowledge. And he serves as also like as this voice of warning, and he provides all this crucial information about Egyptian lore, which kind of adds to the film's sense of authenticity. Um, as we said, the Terror with Boris and Jack Nicholson, and the Raven with Boris and Peter Lorre. Yeah, I mean, I love both of those. I'll probably eventually cover a lot of stuff like that later on with the channel. So, and I'm glad you're here to talk about that stuff too. So, I know you definitely love that stuff just like I do. Um, but to talk about some of the most memorable moments from the Mummy, uh, to me, when the scene when in the beginning when Ralph Norton he reads from that scroll of Thoth, and we see the mummies kind of open briefly and flicker to life. Um, it's genuinely chilling, and it really sets the stage for what happens in the rest of the movie. Um, and then you look at like the scenes with the hypnotic trances, where Imhotep is using those powers to kind of draw Helen closer, and it really highlights the character's vulnerability, and that relentless pursuit from Imhotep. So, yeah, those I love those scenes. Those always stand out to me. And then, of course, the final confrontation in the movie where Helen is empowered by her past life, and her religious belief as well. She rejects Imhotep, and she's invoking the power of Isis on him. And this moment really to me showcases the just the triumph of spirit over ancient magic. So I really like the ending of this movie. But the legacy of this movie, and its impact on horror it holds a really monumental place in the history of horror. Um, and it has established itself as a the classic monster that has been reinterpreted and revisited countless times in movies and TV and literature. So the movie's influence can be also seen in like remakes, the movies with like Brendan Fraser, and sequels and all kinds of different adaptations. There's mummy movies out there like the Hammer horror mummy movies, and there's Hammer horror like Frankenstein movies. And I'll definitely get into those at some point too. I do have some of those planned for later this year, but we'll get there when we get there. Um, but all that stuff. I think it's attempted to recapture the magic and terror of the original, but I always will look at the original Mummy as you know being this masterpiece that that everything else is just an imitation. Um, and like also like I spoke of earlier, the themes in this movie of just forbidden knowledge and just the dangers of disrupting ancient forces, and just the whole allure of the past. It really just that continues to resonate with audiences as well. Um, and beyond its direct influence on the whole mummy subgenre, like I spoke of, the movie also just contributes to the broader tropes of horror movies. Like it's the atmospheric cinematography that's in that, the use of shadows and suspense, and then of course Karloff's performance really helps define the visuals and everything for the genre for decades to come. Um, and The Mummy just remains a testament to the power of classic horror. Despite its age, it really continues, I think, to captivate and terrify audiences, with its timeless themes and just the amazing imagery that's in the movie. Um, it proves that horror could be more than just jump scares. It can be this sophisticated, exploration of fear and obsession and just the power of the human spirit. So, yeah, the Mummy is really cool. I think it's one of my wife Candace's favorites. Um, and while I look at all these Universal monster movies as masterpieces in my eyes, um, you will be surprised to hear that The Mummy is not one of my favorites when it comes to all those original classics. Now I still love it. I don't get me wrong like that, but it's just I love it just like I love the other Universal monster movies. I just love the other ones a bit more than I love this one. And it may have something to do with the whole Egyptian thing, because that Egyptian history stuff. I never really got into that, but I do love everything about this movie though. But my wife, maybe that's why it's one of her favorites, because she is really into the whole Egyptian history and culture and all that. So um, that's definitely understandable. But I do have a few pieces here from the Mummy I wanted to show off. Again, here's some more plushes that I have. This is from the Stuffins line. This one is just like that Dracula I showed earlier. Where's he at? So yeah, these are both like claw machine guys. And Yeah, the Mummy actually is really cool because even though the Dracula doesn't look like Bela Lugosi, I think the Mummy one looks a little bit like Boris Karloff. So that's really cool that they were maybe able to get his likeness for that, but not Bela Lugosi's. And then, like I said, this one right here is from the Stuffins line, like the Frankenstein's monster that I showed earlier. And let's see. Then here is the Funko Pop, the original Funko Pop of the Mummy, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this may be the only Funko Pop that they made of the Mummy, other than like there was one other like it was like a kind of like a metal chrome set of four different monsters. I think the Mummy might have been in that one, but um, Yeah, I mean, like this, they don't make as much mummy stuff as they do like Dracula and Frankenstein and Wolfman, um, but that's that's cool. Um, I get whatever I can get my hands on though. And then of course here's the VHS that I have. It's still got the little sticker on there, so I paid $5 for that at a convention. Um, and this one, I don't know when this one was released. Let me see. Looks like this VHS was released in 1999, so it was one of the later VHS releases before they stopped making VHSs. But like I said, I don't really care when when the release is, who released it, what um, if it's Universal Monsters related, I will definitely pick it up. Um, and this is like same kind of deal like the Frankenstein I showed earlier. Had like a little poster image on the top there, and then tells about the movie on the back and all that. Um, but yeah, super cool stuff, guys. Um, so the next movie I'm going to be talking about is one of my favorite Universal Monster movies. And this one was also another James Whale classic. James Whale did the original Frankenstein. He also did Bride of Frankenstein, but this one came in between those two. This is The Invisible Man from 1933. Like I said, this is one of my top favorite Universal Monster movies. It's a masterpiece in just building suspense, uh, blending dark humor with like chilling thrills, and explores just the corrupting influence of power. So this one is based off of H.G. Wells's novel from 1897, um, and the movie remains this groundbreaking achievement, proving that sometimes what you don't see is far more terrifying. Um, so, like I said, this movie was directed by James Whale, and the Invisible Man character really solidifies his reputation as a leading character in the Universal Monsters franchise, in my opinion. Um, so James Whale, who's really known for his like stylized and often darkly comedic approach to horror, he previously directed Frankenstein from 1931, and then he would go on and do Bride of Frankenstein um, in 1935. And both of those movies are considered genre benchmarks, I think. And James Whale's understanding of just this visual storytelling and ability to create these uh, these memorable characters really shines bright in The Invisible Man. Um, so, like I said, the movie was adapted from H.G. Wells's novel, and it's a work that really explores themes of like scientific pride, uh, being alienated, and just like the dangerous potential of this unchecked power. Um, and James Whale, he expertly translates these anxieties to the screen. He just really creates this cautionary tale that really resonates even today, I think. Um, so the story of the movie opens in this little English village where this heavily bandaged stranger arrives during a snowstorm, and he demands a room at the Lion's Head Inn. So he introduces himself to them as Dr. Jack Griffin, and he insists on complete privacy. And he sets up this little makeshift laboratory in his room. So all the villagers there are immediately like suspicious of this secretive behavior and his odd appearance. Um, so as tensions escalate, as they always do, um, Dr. Griffin he's desperate for this privacy. So he just gets fed up with these villagers. And he finally reveals his secret that he is invisible, and he starts unwrapping himself and all that. And like this maniacal laughter. It's a great scene. I love it. But the movie then um, it chronicles his kind of descent into madness. Like because I described like his maniacal laughter and all that. Um, and he just begins this like criminal behavior as he utilizes his whole ability to be invisible, just for personal gain, and and eventually a violent revenge. So Griffin's invisibility is a result of this dangerous experiment involving a powerful and this unstable chemical called monocaine, and he intended to use it to alter his pigmentation and and unlock these secrets of like light refraction. But the drug has unforeseen and um, unforeseen and devastating like side effects, which drives him to paranoia and megalomania and all that. So um, and because of this, invisibility and the deteriorating effects of the monocaine, Griffin, he plans to just create this world where only he holds power, and he just becomes this reign of terror across the nation. And his whole scheme involves like recruiting his former assistant, which is Dr. Arthur Kemp, to assist him in you know and all these different deeds, like these evil deeds that he's wanting to hand out. And he even goes as far as to threaten Dr. Kemp with death if he refuses to help him. So, um, to talk about some of these characters, like I said, Dr. Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man himself, is played by Claude Rains, or I should say, voiced by Claude Rains, and this was Claude Rains's film debut, I'm pretty sure. So, and then if you know the ending of the movie, then you know how that kind of pans out. But Claude Rains, his voice is the only thing you just hear him, but you don't never see um, what he looks like through all of the movie up until the very end. You just hear his voice. So for that to be his like film debut, that's really odd. But I also love the idea of that as well. Um, but but Griffin is this, he's this brilliant but kind of arrogant scientist whose ambition leads to his downfall, and he's initially driven by all this scientific curiosity, and he becomes consumed by the power that his invisibility grants him, and then he just transforms into this ruthless and kind of almost evil character. And Claude Rains' performance, primarily through the voice acting, like I said, it's iconic, I think, as well, just like all of these other monsters that I've been talking about. Um, and it conveys his both Griffin's desperation and just descent into madness. And then you have Dr. Arthur Kemp, who is played by William Harrigan, and like I said, he's Griffin's former assistant and friend, and he kind of just represents the voice of reason and conscience. And he's ultimately forced to betray Griffin to save himself and just prevent further chaos. Um, so his whole like thing or I guess you call it his heroic actions, if you want to call it that, they really provide like a counterpoint to Griffin's madness. But I don't know if I would call Dr. Kemp really a hero. I mean, he's pretty cowardly in this. But anyway, moving on. The next character I want to talk about is Flora, who is played by Gloria Stewart. Um, and she is Griffin's fiance, and she's the daughter of his mentor, Dr. Cranley. And Flora, she represents Griffin's like humanity and connection to the world that he's losing, at this point. And she's deeply concerned about his well-being and just ultimately mourns, his fate. Um, and her whole presence in the movie just adds this layer of emotional depth to the story. And so something I kind of realized is when I was watching this movie and I was just doing a little bit of research on it. Gloria Stewart. who plays Flora, um, also played the older version of Rose in James Cameron's Titanic. So there's definitely like there's a tie-in between this movie and Titanic, but that's not the only thing. So Flora, okay, Flora means flower, and Rose is also a flower. So Gloria Stewart ended up playing with two different characters with flower names. Okay, so that's not all. So look at who Rose's love interest was in Titanic, his character, Jack, right? Who is Flora's love interest in Invisible Man, Jack. So ain't that crazy? I mean that has to be just like a huge coincidence, unless like James Cameron was just a huge fan of Invisible Man and he created those characters um, for Titanic based off of that. But man, if that's not the case, then what a huge coincidence that is. Um, Russell, you said in Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein, Lon Chaney took over one scene for Frankenstein's monster because Glenn Strange hurt his ankle when throwing the woman out the window. I remember reading about that. I didn't know that for the longest time, but yeah, I do remember reading that, and Glenn Strange is my favorite version of the Frankenstein's monster. So this I'm not covering in those movies tonight, but this Sunday I'll be covering a couple of those, including Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein. So super excited for that. Hope you're there for that as well, Russell. Um, but moving on from talking about Flora and all these Titanic references, Dr. Cranley, who is Flora's father and played by Henry Travers, who you may know as the angel Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life. Um, like I said, he's Flora's father. He's also Griffin's mentor in this, and he's this respected scientist who is initially proud of Griffin's research, but becomes worried more and more over time about these methods that Griffin is conducting. Um, and he serves as just kind of a cautionary figure for the movie, which represents the whole ethical responsibilities of pursuing these experiments in science. Um, and those are the characters that are like the main characters of this movie. But there's one character, it's kind of a minor character that I definitely have to talk about because I absolutely love this character, and that's the character of Jenny Hall, who's played by Una O'Connor. So she is the innkeeper of the Lion's Head. In the beginning of the movie, and is to me, personally, this iconic and memorable highlight of the movie. So her scenes are amazing when it comes to the comedic terror, perfectly like balancing this like slapstick, um, physical comedy with like genuine fear, which kind of makes the movie a pioneer for comedy horror. Um, and that's one of the many reasons why I love this because like I'm a huge fan of comedy horror, and yeah, and Una O'Connor she fully commits to the physical demands of this role, from like her wide-eyed stares and her trembling hands to her flailing attempts to just like defend herself against chairs flying through the air, and she really portrays this character brilliantly. And her reactions are exaggerated, but they're never unbelievable. They are really rooted in this character genuinely being terrified and just overwhelmed by the unexplained. Um, Vincent Price is a great cameo as in Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein at the end when they get into the boat. Yeah, the voice of the Invisible Man is Vincent Price, and funny thing, the first movie that Vincent Price was ever in was The Invisible Man Returns. So I'm a huge Vincent Price fan. Like he's like my horror movie hero. Like he's like the number one guy that I love when it comes to these horror icons. Vincent Price is the man. And Fright Rags just put out a new line of Vincent Price T-shirts. If you want to go check those out, so I'm probably going to maybe pick one of those up if they have them with them when I go to Horror Hound Weekend here in a few weeks. Um, let's see. So let's talk about some moments, I guess, from The Invisible Man that really stand out to me for being really innovative and just impactful in horror movie history. So first of all, the unveiling when Griffin finally removes his bandages in the lion's head inn, and he's revealing he does there's no face, there's nothing. It's just genuinely shocking and just unforgettable moment. And then, but I think he takes everything off except like his dress shirt. So you're just seeing like this dress shirt like moving around the room and this maniacal laughter from Claude Rains. It's a huge staple of the film, if, in my opinion. And then there's a scene with this bicycle where Griffin he's joyfully terrorizing this countryside by just manipulating objects and like this old man's hat, and there's a bicycle, and he's just showcasing all this really mischievous stuff that he can use because of him being invisible. Um, and I think this scene beautifully blends like the early stages of these types of special effects with comedic timing as well. So this movie was really groundbreaking in a lot of ways. Um, and then there's a scene where the Invisible Man he pushes this police car off the side of the road, and that's pretty crazy. It's the first that was the first for Universal monster movies. And then in the end as well, Griffin's death, which is the film's final scene where Griffin is shot and he slowly becomes like visible as his life is fading away. And it's both tragic and really visually striking, I think, because it highlights this ultimate cost of his like ambition and just the really the fragile nature of his power that he overestimated. Um, so the legacy of the Invisible Man, I think it leaves a mark on the horror genre and pop culture because it has these really innovative special effects, uh, particularly for its time, and it just sets a new standard for visual storytelling. Um, the movies like themes of the scientific pride and just the corrupting influence of power and just the fear of the unknown really continue to resonate, I think, with people nowadays, especially young filmmakers and all that. But the character of the Invisible Man, has been reinterpreted countless times in movies and TVs and all that. It really demonstrates that appeal of the concept. So the movie has, inspired, like I said, numerous horror films that explore like themes of invisibility and scientific experimentation and just the darker side of human nature. Kind of like Hollow Man. I don't know if you guys remember Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon. That was definitely inspired by the Invisible Man. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But beyond the horror elements, the Invisible Man really offers this timeless, cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked, ambition and just the importance of that ethical responsibility, I guess. Um, it's a movie that really stays with you long after you've watched it, and it reflects on just the nature of power and identity, and those consequences of just pursuing knowledge without any kind of boundaries. Um, I really think it's a testament to James Wells, like you know genius of being a director, and it's really just, it's like I said before, it's one of my all-time favorites when it comes to Universal Monsters. Um, Now, unfortunately, I didn't pull anything out from my collection of Invisible Man. I honestly forgot to. But I will make that up to you guys at some point. I'll show you some of the stuff in my collection in another video later down the road. But so I guess I'll go ahead and just jump right into the last movie that I watched for this part one of the Universal Monsters Week. Um, and that's the follow up to the original classic Frankenstein from 1931. This is Bride of Frankenstein from 1935, and this movie isn't just a sequel; it's a masterpiece. And it builds upon that foundation that uh, the Frankenstein movie from 1931 built. It elevates the horror genre with its its gothic atmosphere and just these unforgettable characters. Um, so again, this movie was directed by James Whale, who we've talked about quite a bit, so far, and that directed Invisible Man and the original Frankenstein. And James Whale's background was in theater, and I think it's really evident in this movie's like the dramatic staging and just the really expressive performances and just that whole theatrical flair that the movie adds. He really brought a unique blend of horror and humor and humanity, I guess, to the project, which kind of pushes the boundaries of the genre. Um, he resisted initially on directing a sequel to the original Frankenstein, but Universal was very they insisted on having him do this, and they persuaded him by making him this promise of having more creative control. So they ultimately convinced him, to do the sequel, and James Whale he saw the sequel just as this opportunity, I guess, to explore more in the themes of just creation and isolation and all that, and just I guess also just like a desire for companionship as well, and just this kind of a satirical way. Um, so Bride of Frankenstein, picks up immediately after the ending of the original film. But before we get into that, so the beginning of this movie has a little prologue scene with Elsa Lanchester as Mary Shelley, and she's talking along with this. Uh, I guess it's like a Baron guy, and I can't remember what the other guy's name was. But they're just kind of like talking with her about her story of Frankenstein that she wrote, and how fascinated they are with that. And then she kind of goes into, well, that's not the end of the story, and then it just kind of like fades in to this the story that we're about to see in the movie of Bride of Frankenstein, where the villagers, they're celebrating this apparent death of the monster, and Henry Frankenstein is still alive. He's weak. He's really weak, but he's still alive, and he's recovering at his home. And despite his vow to abandon his monstrous creations and just you know there's this influence from his past that comes along, who's very persuasive and very manipulative, and that's Dr. Pretorius, who was a colleague of Henry's previously, and he was kind of the inspiration for what Henry was doing in the original film. So, so Pretorius is trying to draw Henry back into this world of unnatural science, and like I said, Pretorius, who was a former colleague of Henry's, he's been conducting his own little experiments in creating artificial life as well, just on a much smaller scale. So there's like he has these little like tubes that has these like little tiny people in it, like a king and a queen and all these different other little characters that he has inside these little like almost like vials, and like I said, they're just like little tiny bottle encased humans, and he uses this as a demonstration of his success and argues that him and Henry together they can create life on a much bigger scale. So Pretorius reveals his ambitions to and this desire to create a mate for the monster that Henry has created, believing that companionship will pacify, I guess, the monster and solve the problem of all this destructive behavior that he's doing. Um, so meanwhile, while this is all going on, the monster, who is far from being destroyed, he survived the fire, and he's now roaming the countryside, and he discovers this little cabin, and and he forms a bond with this blind hermit. And this is my favorite scene in the entire movie. It's one of my favorite scenes of all the Universal Monster movies. But he forms this bond with this blind hermit, who teaches him about kindness and friendship, and he teaches him how to talk. So you're seeing a lot of development and evolution with the monster in this film. Um, and this whole scene with the hermit, the blind hermit, it's a really a moment of just this profound humanity for the monster, and it just offers this kind of glimpse into the potential for good that lies within him. Um, and this brief solace is soon shattered when these villagers stumble upon the hermit's cabin, and they see the monster, and they drive him back into isolation and rage. Um, and one of those hunters those villagers that shows up is actually a young John Carradine, and he has that one little small part. He's not. I don't think he's credited in the movie at all. But it was definitely cool to see a young John Carradine in that role. Um, but eventually, the monster does cross paths with Pretorius, and uh, realizing that the doctor intends to create a companion for him, he forces Henry to collaborate on this. So, uh, driven by guilt and I guess just a twisted sense of responsibility, um, Henry reluctantly agrees to work with him. So the scientists they assemble this bride, as a mate for the monster from these various corpses, and they use a lightning storm to just to bring her to life. But when the bride is awakened, she rejects the monster with this like terrified scream, and heartbroken and enraged, the monster declares that that she hate me like others or something like that, and he then destroys the lab and choosing death for himself and the bride and Pretorius in one of the most iconic lines from the movie, "We belong dead." So it's really cool. I love that. I love the ending of this movie. It's very kind of poetic, because he would just rather they all die there than endure any kind of further rejection in its life. But Henry, however, is spared, and he's allowed to leave with Elizabeth, where he's, I guess, just left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. Um, yeah, this is absolutely, like I said, a beautiful masterpiece of a movie. Boris Karloff again, reprising his role as the monster, just a tragic character, driven by loneliness and just a desire for being accepted. And in this movie, he really displays like this ability to speak and understand, and there's a lot of development with that character, and just adds layers of depth to it. And he also represents this as the dangers of that unchecked scientific ambition, and just the consequences of society rejecting him. So again, as always, Karloff's portrayal is iconic. Just where he imbues this character with a sense of humanity, and it's amazing. It's a legendary performance in my opinion. And then, of course, you got Colin Clive back again as Henry Frankenstein. This time he's haunted by the repercussions of his past actions. And he's torn between just this scientific ambition and a desire for a normal life with Elizabeth. So he just embodies this com- um, moral complexities of a scientific experimentation and just the responsibility that comes with playing God. Um, and then you got Dr. Pretorius, who was played by Ernest Thesiger, I think is how you say his name. Um, but he's kind of a more of a flamboyant and morally ambiguous scientist who serves as like a catalyst for the creation of the bride in this. And he represents that whole pride and that can accompany these scientific pursuits. So his performance as Dr. Pretorius in this is awesome. I absolutely love it, and he's just this evil, wicked character. Just makes him a truly memorable villain. Um, and then you got the title character herself, the bride, who is played by Elsa Lanchester, who also plays Mary Shelley in the beginning prologue of the movie. And she, even though she's briefly in the movie, especially towards the end, um, her appearance is so impactful to the story of the movie because of just the whole theme of acceptance and companionship. Um, and like I said, while she only appears in the final act, just her makeup and just the scream that she lets out, and just her whole look and vibe just really cements her place in horror history. Um, she really embodies that ultimate rejection of the monster who, you know, pretty much basically says in the end, fuck it. If I can't have her, then I don't want anybody. I don't need to be here. We belong dead. Um, and then, of course, I have to mention the blind hermit, who's played by, I think the guy's name is O.P. Heggie or something like that. Um, this guy does such a wonderful job, just an amazing job as this character. And again, rest in peace to Gene Hackman, who played the parodied version in Young Frankenstein of the blind hermit. But I love this guy in the original that plays it because he just that whole scene, like I said, is my favorite scene in the whole movie. Just because it's just brief moment of kindness and acceptance in the monster's life, and it highlights his potential for just connection and the cruelty of a world that fears him because he just wanted a friend. He just wanted someone to be there for him, I guess. Um, but as far as like the memorable moments go for this, like I said, there's I've really touched on that with the scene with the blind hermit, and to further go, I love that when he has like the monster laying down, and he's over top of it, and he's praying to God, and he's just thanking God for bringing him a friend, to someone to be there to be his eyes when he can't see. So it's a really beautiful scene, and that's not something you see a whole lot in modern horror. Um, but I think it just kind of like it plays out that whole duality complex of things that are in the film. But yeah, just moving on, I guess I should also talk about the creation scene of with just the bubbling beakers and the crackling electricity and just all that dramatic lighting. It's really just this visual feast, um, and it remains one of the to me, one of the most recognizable and influential scenes in horror movie history. Um, and just when in this same to follow up on that, the bride's introduction to all this after she's created, complete with Elsa Lanchester's, iconic hair and the makeup and just the whole look that she has. It's just instantly memorable. And just to add on to that is that whole terrified scream she lets out. The shot of that is iconic. Um, but in that moment, it's also very heartbreaking for the monster because of the ultimate rejection. Um, and there's just so much to talk about when it comes to this because, like I said, this is a absolute masterpiece. Um, Out of all of the Frankenstein series of movies, this one's definitely my favorite. And I'm not counting Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein. That's kind of separate from. Well, I separate that from like the rest of the Frankenstein series. But if I'm just looking at those the regular Frankenstein series, this one's definitely my favorite. And as far as its legacy goes, Bride of Frankenstein is just this timeless, you know, exploration, I guess, of humanity and creation and just the search for belonging. Um, its influence can be seen in countless movies and TV shows and works of art and um, just that iconic image of the bride has really just become a cultural touchstone, I guess. It's instantly recognized by people who have, experienced this movie and just horror and that's involved in pop culture. Like that's a thing. That's that the um even if you're just pop culture, you don't have to be a hardcore horror fan to recognize because that imagery and that moment in the movie is showcased in so much stuff throughout pop culture. So like that, even people that are not horror fans recognize the Bride of Frankenstein. And it's just it's been because it's been endlessly imitated over the years, um, and it's a testament to James Whale's vision and the performances of the cast of the movie because it remains just this very powerful and moving, uh, cinematic experience. It's definitely I think solidified itself as one of the greatest horror movies ever made. Um, because it demonstrates that horror can be both terrifying and deeply profound. Um, but yeah, absolutely love it, masterpiece. But I want to show a couple things from Bride of Frankenstein. So let me go ahead and lay these up here, and I will go ahead and show off first the sideshow collectibles uh, figures that I have. So this is the monster, Boris Karloff's the monster from and his look that's portrayed in Bride of Frankenstein. So I showed you the other one from the original film earlier, but this is his look from Bride of Frankenstein, and so there's this image on the back of him as well. So when we open this up here, so this one, I think I really like this one. More so than I do the original one that I have. Um, and I like the little accessories that come with him. He's got like the skull and some kind of bone from a skeleton, maybe like a femur bone or something. I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, he's super cool. I love this. Um, and he's a just a great part of my Frankenstein collection. Um, So let's see here. Let me go ahead and put him down there. And then this is the bride herself. I mean, this is when I got this thing, like I ordered this from eBay and When it arrived, it was still sealed in the shipping box from the factory. So this thing had never seen the light of day until I took it out of that shipping box from the factory. Um, and of course, there she is in all of her beautiful glory. Um, wow, isn't that such a cool looking figure? I love this so much. This is probably definitely out of all the ones that I have of the 12-inch sideshow collectibles. Um, she's probably my favorite. I really do like this one a lot. Um, I mean, she's got the all the different accessories from the lab. Got the heart there. When that scene when Henry's like doing all like the pumping test and making the heart come to life. And see, it's got the little accessory right there that Henry uses when he's doing the tests. So yeah, it's very cool. I love this doll. It's so cool. Um, so let me go ahead and so this is from the Stuffins line. This is the Bride plush that I have. This is the only Bride plush I have too. I believe uh, yeah, I don't have the larger one of this, but I really do like this one a lot. I grabbed this one from the flea market here where I live a while back, so I was like, yeah, heck yeah, it's one I didn't have. So and then here's like the Dracula that I showed earlier. This is the blacklight pop figure of the Bride. Um, and this is the only one that I have of the Funko Pops when it comes to the Bride. But I love the colors on this one. Just the designs, close up on her face and all that really pops. Super cool. I'm not big into Funko Pops like I used to be, but I love getting all of the horror ones, especially the Universal Monster ones, if I'm able to. Um, and I had one other thing here. Oh, that's right. So I also have this VHS. These are actually this series of um, of the Universal Monsters tapes. This is my favorite series, and I have several of them. You can see a few back here on my shelf as well that I pulled this one off of. Um, but I love this series. I love the art on the boxes and on the back covers as well. Those are super cool. I think I picked this one up at a convention as well for like maybe like 5-10 bucks. I can't remember, but yeah, love that box art. I mean, it's a iconic image of Elsa Lanchester there. Um, yeah, she was such a beautiful woman. Um, but that is it for all the collectibles for Bride of Frankenstein. Um, I mean, this video has been a lot of fun, um, and this may be so far my favorite stream or video that I've done thus far here on the channel, just because Universal Monsters is super important to me. It's one of my favorite things in this world. So for me to come on here and share my love for this stuff for you guys, and that means a lot to me too. That you guys are checking this out and talking along with me, like Russell has and everyone else has, in the past videos. But I guess that's it for this video, guys. Like I said, I really enjoyed doing this video, and I look forward to presenting part two for you guys this Sunday. If you want to come and check that out as well, and that's going to be with 6 more Universal Monster movies. Same time, 9 p.m. Eastern time this Sunday. I'll be doing that. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I have, and I appreciate all of you for checking it out. I want to thank everyone who either watched this live and was here in the chat, like Russell. Um, I mean, this has been so fun. I just want to thank you guys so much for being here. And if you're watching this on replay, thank you guys as well for watching this. So um, I ask one thing, guys, though. If you're checking this video out, please drop me a comment below on what your favorite Universal Monster movie or your character is. And just, yeah, just let me know because I love talking about this stuff. It's super fun to me. Um, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. Um, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button to catch more videos from me like this one. And you know, click that bell. Of course, click that bell for any future notifications. Um, so with all that said, I'm Crater. This is CraterMania. I love you guys and have a good night.